What? How you're doing? Just because it looks the same, just because it smells the same, doesn't mean it's going to taste the same. So guys, what are you talking about? Nothing to do with food. I screwed up. A real nug mistake too. File extensions and codecs. Just because something has the same file extension does not mean it's using the same codec. So, I'm doing the whole detox internet thing, and while doing that, or like preparing for it, I started to pull down audiobooks and music that I have. So I've got like a big old stash of FLAC and a big old stash of audiobooks, but I wanted them more portable. FLAC files are huge. So if you're only looking to carry around, say, 64 gigs of music, you're not going to be carrying around a lot of FLAC. But if you convert it, if you change if you re-encode it to something else a little bit more friendly, you can carry around a lot more because you don't really need to have a hi-fi experience on the go. You can, but you don't necessarily need one. I was re-encoding things for this little dealio. It's a Sandisk Clip Sport. It's actually quite a nice little player in the grand scheme. Billy Bob Basic plays a bunch of different files, OGG, FLAC, MP3, I think Wave might be on there. I don't know if M4A is on there, but it plays back a lot of different formats, and it's cheap. And it's FM radio on. Why? You never know. You might want an FM radio. The cool thing with this is that literally the battery's really small in it, but it lasts ages, like hours and hours and hours. And if you were going to plug it in, well, it charges up really quickly too, because it's, like I said, really small battery. So I was going to say, well, I've got a device that fast charges. Yes, but you need more power to keep that thing going longer. You might be able to fast charge it, but you're still using more power than this thing is to do basically the same job. And I've been using this and a pair of really cheap, like JVC, what they call like jelly earbuds. I can't remember what the actual thing is. They're JVCs, the little pink things I've got. And they're nice. They do the job, right? So I'm going through my FLAC collection, and I decided I was if I'm going to convert files, I'm going to convert to OGG. Now, OGG is a free codec. It's like a free open source, free software foundation supported codec. Basically, you can just take it. Use it. MP3 has licenses, or had licenses up until recent history, and most other codecs carry licenses too. So, depending on what you're doing, some distributions, for example, if you're using Linux, wouldn't include MP3 by default. That would have to be something you'd optionally install, because there was some jiggery-pokery behind the scenes that had to make it so. But with OGG and FLAC and stuff like that, you just take it, go with it. And so I quite liked OGG. OGG was the kind of equivalent to MP3, converting everything to OGG. It's not the greatest codec in the world by any stretch of the imagination. It isn't, but it does the job. As I say, it's basically an equivalent of near enough of MP3, and this little device plays it. So I'm going through and I'm converting my files, and then I was like, right, audiobooks. I'm going to convert my audiobooks right off the bat from AXX. I don't remember which it is, but it's the Audible encrypted thing. You have to decrypt it and then you can re-encode it. I'm going to automatically just do these as OGG files. And I convert them, and last night I desperately wanted to listen to an audiobook. I was going round and round and round, I just couldn't sleep. And an audiobook will settle me down. Just pop one of the little earbuds in, and I'll just be able to lay down and just drift off to an audiobook. File format not supported. But it's an OGG file. It's an OGG file. Why is it not playing? And I didn't really think about it. And I should have known from when I was encoding it. And then I bust out one of my bigger players. Now I didn't go for like a smartphone or anything like that to download my audiobooks from Audible or whatever. I went for another one of my media players. I have a Hibi R3 DAP, which has support for tons of codecs. It's a much more powerful player, it's a much higher quality player, but it was just for that moment I wanted to listen to some audio. Realistically, I mean, I'm supposed to be using this to get away from the kind of higher end stuff, to kind of disconnect a bit, but confession, I used the Hibi last night to listen to some audiobooks. The files worked fine on there, but then the Hibi went to me, by the way, this file is in Opus. It's OGG Opus. And I was like, oh, you've made a nub mistake, Skaz. Went back to one of my other files, some of my music. My music was converted in a different way, using a different program. Oh, Vorbis. So OGG has two separate codecs going on. Vorbis and Opus. One of them's a little bit worse than MP3. And the other one, a lot of people are using that they don't quite realise. It's pretty good for streaming and all that kind of stuff. Opus. Opus is the newer one. Trouble with Opus is a lot of stuff doesn't necessarily support it. If you have like an Android-based player or like an iPhone or a modern computer on a modern operating system, OGG and Opus are supported off the bat, out of the box, generally with no trouble. Not so much the case back in the day. You used to have to install all different codecs and things to use, OGGs and FLACs and all these different things if they weren't like WMVs or, in Apple's case, like AAC or whatever. You had to install different stuff to get that stuff to play. But generally these days, it's not a problem. However, this thing comes from a time before Opus was widely supported by the world as a whole. And so, whilst it does play OGG, it plays OGG Vorbis. Now, Opus is also, you also get the extension of Opus, OPUS, but my stuff was packaged in the container of OGG. So I didn't really think about it, even though I was the one that set the argument in the player, or in the encoder for the books, use Opus, because Opus is a fantastic codec for low bitrate streams. Like, realistically, Opus crushes Vorbis and MP3 when you go down to them lower areas where the other two fall apart. So when we're talking like 96K, Opus is it's very good, very good. It ain't FLAC, but then FLAC's your big boy. Well, FLAC is what you want or what you use when you're like backing up CDs and you want to keep that CD quality, but in a file. Stuff like MP3 and Vorbis and Opus are what you use when you want to, take some of the stuff on the go. Admittedly, you might not. You might go crazy like I did and have a 200 gigabyte memory card in your player just for FLAC, but that tends to get a little heavy, it's chunky. There's not a lot you can carry around at that point. So, as I said, Opus is very, very good. Very good. And as I say, a lot of places use Opus because it's open and free. A lot of places use it for like streaming, and some voice chat clients use it because it is really good quality given the bit rate that you have to throw at it. Like MP3, to get a decent quality out of MP3, you're talking like 256 kbps or higher. Once upon a time, you used to download music at about 128. Opus can do that at around 96. So that's quite a chunk. You know what I mean? It doesn't sound like a lot, but it is quite a lot in the grand scheme of things. So, especially if you're doing spoken word, you can go even lower and still get really clean, crisp audio. Not that there's a huge number of frequencies you're going to be cutting out in just spoken word. You're not going to have to try and hold the range of like guitars and drums and bass and flutes and things like that, but irrelevant. So, yeah, I converted all these files. I saw OGG as the extension, and didn't even think, is it going to be using Vorbis or Opus? Doesn't support Opus. So I'm going to have to do some jiggery pokery again, I guess, to get me audiobooks on here in OGG if I want them on here. But that's kind of one of the things I wanted to just throw out there, that just because something has a specific, like just because a player or something, if you go on Amazon or whatever and it says, we support this, just because something has the same container name doesn't mean it's the same on the inside, kind of thing. Just because something looks like a jam donut doesn't necessarily mean it's a jam donut. You know, it might be a chocolate-filled donut, or it might be a custard-filled donut. That said, though, oddly enough, you can also have a weird spin in that some files they have different extensions. So MKV and MP4, as an example, yet on the inside have the same data streams. They just have a different container, a different wrapper, but everything on the inside is the same effectively. And so what you can do in those cases, if the files on the inside are the same, you can remux them, which is just literally pull the internals out and slap them into a new container and job done. You don't need to re-encode it because it's not re-encoding. Re-encoding is like literally bit by bit, byte by byte, going through and take this, put it here, take this, do a bit of processing on it, putting it here. Whereas remuxing is literally, this is the thing. I don't want to change the thing. I just want to put it in a different bit. Or I want this bit and this bit from here, but I don't want these bits. Just take these out, leave them there, or copy those out and put them in this one. Remuxing. Very, very, very simply. So just because you have different extensions doesn't necessarily mean that they're different on the gut side of it. But then just because you have the same extension doesn't necessarily mean it's the same gut-wise either. So I've learnt my lesson that if you want to play certain codecs, kind of put some thought into it. I didn't think. If you want to do that kind of thing, by the way, this is an alright option. The Sandisk Clip Sport. They're about 25 quid. Then you spend a couple bucks on a memory card to put in it. But I would personally recommend something more modern, just because of file support, format support right out of the box, and generally ease of use. They might use a bit more power, but they'll probably be more feature rich. They won't be quite as greedy as, say, using your phone, but they might have Wi-Fi and Bluetooth and all these other things, touch screens and all that. You don't necessarily always need those, but they're options, and you can get a decent player for about 100 quid. I know it's quite a jump from about 25 to 100, but the feature set is really there, and the ease of use really is there. You'll have far more support for far more codecs. Opus will be there. Vorbis, OGG Vorbis, Opus, MP4 or M4A, I suppose, FLAC, and all those. It will be there. That it will play them, and you can probably play them in probably Ape as well. Actually, thinking I didn't even mention Ape, but the newer players will do the job, and you can't go wrong with a decent DAP, digital audio player. Very nice devices these days. So if you don't want to risk the minefield, plus, as I've mentioned in a video prior to this one, that if you do go the cheaper route, not only are you going to have to worry about file support. I mean, it's more than MP3, but you might find that some of your files aren't compatible. Is that players like this, the cheaper players, read data off the memory card in the order that you put it on there. And so if you drag and drop files on here in bulk, so you batch upload them or batch move them over to here. So like, I don't know, you've got an album, just an entire album, and you just go Windows, Mac, Linux, whatever, copy all of these files onto here. The player then might go, well, okay, open the folder, and you go in there, all of a sudden, like, it'll be track 5, track 3, track 1, track 10, and you're like, why is all this in the wrong order? It's because the operating system has written the files it's just shotgunned them onto the card, and whichever one completed first was the one that's become number 1 on the list. It's all down to the file system on the device. You can fix that with little bits of software, but if you were to have a higher end player like a Heidi's player or a Hibby or a Shanling or a Fio, so like higher end DAPs in the £100 ish range, you can get them even cheaper than that, but I'm just going to say £100 for a decent starter, like the M0 or the R2 or I can't really think of anything by Heidi's off the top of my head, but that was Shanling and Hibby, I just mentioned there, the M0 and the R2. And I can't remember which one Fio does, but Fio does a nice little cheap one. They will just read the memory card and go, right, we're going to sort these alphabetically. They have a bit more grunt in them to do the work. So they're easier to use at that price point. So maybe if you don't want to do the extra faff, you don't want to do the extra legwork, that might be the way forwards. But then you are paying more money. But then they probably also have better amps in them too, so you can drive better headphones and stuff. But for the most part, something like this will do the job. Just be aware that not all files are created equal. Not all files with the same extension will have the same contents, kind of thing. They won't all be encoded the same way, and so you might end up doing what I did and just go, duh, look at that. It's got the same 3-letter extension on it. That's got the same 3-letter extension on it. That supports that 3-letter extension. Oh my god, why don't half my files work? Because you weren't paying attention, mate. So, yeah, good times. The joys of having actual files over streaming and stuffs. But you can fix those if you've got actual files, whereas you can't with streaming services. If for some reason the Bathory album is completely labelled incorrectly, you can't do anything about it. Good times. Or if there are entire albums where songs are broken, and there are, because I've checked, and it's the same on Apple Music, because they probably get the same, they get the masters from the label, and they're all using the same files. When they're broken, you can't sort it. If you've got a CD, well, you can rip it and do whatever you want with it. Anyways, story of my mistakes, story of me being a Burke. I'm going to head off, so I hope you're well, and I'll see you all with a bit of luck in the next one. Now I'm going to have to do jiggery-pokery to get my audiobooks to work, or just use the Hibby. But that seems like a bit of a cop-out, really. Something to think about.